Hey everybody, welcome back. Barry Cloyd with you again, and today we're at Wachtel Farms out in the middle of farm country on a hot summer day. You guys like trucks? I like trucks, and it is really important, the part that trucks play in getting that little soybean from pod to plate. So we're gonna check that out today, find out all we need to know about trucks and their importance in this whole process. So, there's lots to learn, lots to see and do. You ready? Let's do it. Really? Very cool. Like I said, today we're going to talk about trucks. So let's head on over to the scale and we'll meet our host, Gary from Wachtel Farms. Hey, Gary, how you doing?
Great, how you doing?
Great, good to meet you.
Glad to meet you.
Okay, here we are. This is Gary Wachtel, and he is the owner of Wachtel Farms. And walking up here, as I saw you pull up, I noticed something that looks vaguely familiar. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is a scale, right?
Absolutely, it's a 70 or 12 foot by 70 scales, and as we track every field of soybeans that we harvest, and we weigh every field, and we do that for a variety of reasons. For either we have landlords to keep track of shares, or every variety that we plant, we want to know how they're performing. So that's the gauge that we use. We know the yield on every field, and so that's why we use the scales.
There is so much to this. And the more I see, the more questions I have about it. So we're gonna answer a few of those questions and maybe anticipate a few as we take the tour of Wachtel Farms. All right, let's see how sensitive this scale is. We got a big old truck on here right now. Gary just stepped on it, and I'm gonna do it too.
Looks like you
I had a big breakfast. What can I tell you?
Looks like you weigh about 180.
Yeah, pretty close. Okay, Gary, we've got our truck all weighed and it's loaded with beans, and now what? What's the next step?
Well, the next step, after we pull on the scales, I make out a scale ticket and record that, and then we go from here to our bucket elevator with the pit. We'll unload it, and it'll go to a bin for storage, and then delivery whatever the grain sold.
Okay. Can I ride along?
Sure, hop in the truck, let's go. The next step would be untarp the truck, because we always tarp the truck to keep the beans from blowing off, the soybeans off, from blowing off going down the road.
So you can do this automatically from in here?
All I have to do is push a button, and cool. It will unroll.
Oh yeah. We made it this far. We pulled up. We're gonna dump some of these beans. Now, wait a minute, Gary, what are you doing up there?
I'm getting a sample of beans, and I will show you here. We'll pull a sample of soybeans, and we will, this step we'll check the moisture and test weight of the soybeans to see whether they're ready for storage.
All right, and that all happens right here?
That all happens right here.
Okay, we got the moisture checked out, and we found that the moisture content falls within acceptable parameters, and we're gonna dump the beans. So now what happens, Gary?
I unlatch the gate on the door of the hopper bottom trailer and crank the wheel open, and the beans go into the pit, up the bucket elevator to the bin that you have that you're gonna store the soybeans in.
All righty. Okay, we got the beans dumped into the hopper and into the pit there, and now what happens, Gary?
Okay, at this point there's a conveyor underneath this pit, and the beans drop into the conveyor. It's a gooseneck, goes up, dumps into the bucket elevator, and then the bucket elevator has a distributor on top that it goes to multiple bins.
Okay.
So it's set for bin 7, but we want to dump this load into bin number 8. So we'll set it for number 8. And the soybeans will drop into this bin right over here, number 8. Barry, at this point we have an empty truck, so the next process we would drive back to the scales, get the empty weight to get our net bushels, and we do that for a variety of reasons. We crop share some of the land, and so the landlord will need to know. We want him to be very accurate on the bushels that he gets.
Makes sense.
And you burn fuel on every load, so we want so that's the reason we weigh every load back empty.
All right, shall we do it? Let's go. Well, we've learned how this bin gets full of beans. Next step is to find out how it gets emptied out into trucks and sent along on its way to market for processing. Okay, so we got 50,000 bushels of beans in this bin, and we want to unload a few of them to get them on their way to market. What happens next?
Okay, you pull the semi underneath the load-out spout.
Right.
We have a vertical and a horizontal auger to load, and there's a switch for each one. Flip the switches, and we're loading soybeans.
They're on their way,
They're
huh?
on their way.
All right, let's fire it up and fill this truck up. All right, Gary, so we got a full load of beans. We're gonna head out the door to market. What's the next step?
Okay, we'll pull across the scales to see whether we have a legal load, and then we're off to the elevator.
Good idea, let's do it. Hey, Gary. You know, with all these trucks around here and all this big equipment and all the hauling you do, you got to be really concerned about safety. Do you have to have a special license to drive these trucks?
You have to meet all the requirements of the Department of Transportation. To drive a semi, you need to have a commercial driver's license, which is called a CDL.
Okay, heard of that before.
Plus, you have to have a medical card, which are good for every 2 years. You have to get a physical and pass the requirements. We talked about safety. You wear seat belts, which by law. And then also the trucks are each year they're required to be inspected, and with DOT or Department of Transportation, they've got to meet a whole array of safety requirements, and so each truck is inspected on a yearly basis.
And how many trucks do you have on this farm?
We have 3 semis in a tandem, and then 2 pickups.
Okay, lots of little four-wheelers too running around.
And four-wheelers, yes.
They all serve a function.
Oh, absolutely. You check crops and deliver seed to the field and so forth.
And you've got quite an operation here. So these aren't your everyday ordinary tires, are they, Gary?
Oh, absolutely not. The steering tire on the front of the semis is extremely important. The depth of the tread, which to meet requirements, and then also if you blow a tire, going down the road with a load on, it could cause you to lose control. So that's the reason the steering tires, we want to make sure that they're in excellent shape.
It's all about safety, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to be safe at all times.
So Gary, tell me a little bit about this farm. This is quite an operation, and I'm sure it's got quite a history.
It started back with my great-great-grandfather back in the late 1800s, and then my grandfather started a dairy farm on this very location, and when my grandfather passed away in the early 50s, there was a dairy operation here along with about 500 acres of tillable land, and so Dad decided to sell the dairy operation and continued in grain farming then. And then in the early 70s, then we built a confinement farrow to finish hog operation, and then we continued in that for about 20 years as our tillable acres grew on this farm. And then in the late 80s, we got out of the hog operation. Our buildings were pretty much served their purpose, and so we're roughly corn, soybeans, and wheat, double crop soybeans following the wheat. So we're roughly 50% soybeans, 50% corn.
Okay. About how many acres do you farm?
Roughly 6,000 acres now.
Wow. It's quite an operation. It's impressive, and thank you very much for having us here today.
Glad to have you.
Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All right, we got a full load here. We're heading on to the next step in the process, from pod to plate. Stick with us.